I've met people before in the flat place. Once in a while, I'll encounter someone, and you can recognize them quite quickly. It spills out of their eyes and their closed mouths, even when they're smiling, whose world's been rolled out on the rack in the same way as mine. And I fall in love with them, usually, because they feel real to me in a way no one else does. In that flat place where no one else can come, we crouch together, holding each other tight, feeling what is real thrum underfoot and the sky run over our heads, and my blood beating in their head and the other way around. But always, in the end, we part, walking away over a landscape in which one is always alone. Hey everyone. A few months ago I started therapy, and as a result, I feel like I've been very inwardly focused over the past couple months, leading to kind of a lack of YouTube videos. The past month in particular, I've been really focusing on what brings me joy, my hobbies, and trying new hobbies outside of reading. That doesn't mean I've given up on reading. That just means that I'm trying to broaden my horizons and also come home to what I like most about reading and how it fills up my soul so completely. Thus far in April, I have only read one book, but I read it so deeply and it came to me in the absolute perfect time. I picked it up because it was on the long list for the nonfiction women's prize. And yet it was exactly what I needed and wanted in my life, even though I really went into it not knowing a single thing about it. The book is called A Flat Place by Noreen Masud, and this book has been well loved by me over the course of the month. It is water damaged because I took it to Fire and Ice the other day. It has notes from an interview that I listened to with the author. And just so much of it is underlined and highlighted. And this book is not just the author's anymore. This book has become mine as well. So A Flat Place is a memoir by the author Noreen Masud and is a story both of her childhood in Pakistan and her teenage and adult years in the UK. It starts off in Pakistan, just describing her drive to school every single morning, and it's basically where the idea of a flat place came into being. Every morning in Lahore, as I drove to school, there came a point where I'd quieten and coil into myself. Later, she talks about how she knew that this was coming when she would all of a sudden leave the city and just be in the midst of all these flat lands. And she says, all I could see stretching out for miles were huge empty fields. We'd cross from city into fairy tale, and every morning no one noticed but me. She goes on to describe just the way that these flat places made her feel, and how they almost gave her like solace in the midst of a very chaotic life, which we learn more about later. She also talks about Virginia Woolf and how in one of her essays, she talks about a base that your life stands upon. And for our author, flat places are that base. I deeply connected to this idea as I think the base of my life is water. I am always drawn to the water. And even though I have lived other places as an adult, I have come home to Michigan, to the west side of Michigan, and to basically living walking distance from a huge body of water that reminds many people of the ocean. I think whenever I have a stressful day or whenever I just want to feel connected to something bigger than myself, the beach is where I go, or any body of water really, but particularly Lake Michigan and Lake Superior. Lake Michigan is the one by my house. Lake Superior is the one that I crave to go to every summer. It's not officially summer until I have been there, until I have just seen and been in its presence. And in the book, the author talks about how flat places have a personality all of their own and how they are just so completely themselves. And I feel the way She does, when I think about bodies of water, particularly how Lake Michigan and Lake Superior have such drastically different personalities. And for me, Lake Superior is just the perfect mix of absolute beauty and splendor with an intense fierceness as well. And I think that the author kind of uses flat places as a way both to describe herself and the way that she would like to be. And I think the same for me with water, that Lake Superior, just that beauty and quiet and like inwardness paired with a fierceness is definitely something that I strive to live out in my own life. So even though the book starts off kind of describing her childhood in Pakistan and the ways in which a flat place kind of became the title of the book, it does go forward, I guess, to when she's 30 and everything kind of came together or fell apart all at the same time. So when she was 30, she finally had a position that allowed herself to get therapy. And she basically had kind of this feeling that like things weren't quite as they should be, but she wasn't able to identify that the life she lived in Pakistan was actually super traumatic and her dad was actually super abusive. I don't think there's a single time in the book that she uses that word herself. Language is powerful, and perhaps I shouldn't just place that word on her situation, but the connection she had with her dad was very not okay and not super healthy at all. She describes the feeling that she has of something being off as just being kind of vague and unspecific, but also that feeling itself being a flat place. When she does meet with a therapist, there's a name that is placed on her experiences, and that's called complex PTSD. It gives her a word that she can use to describe what has happened to her, but it's her choice if she uses that word or not. In some ways, it allows her to feel seen, and in other ways, it feels incredibly limiting. Essentially, to go into a little bit more of the detail about her family growing up, her dad was the most controlling person ever. He had the whole family living together in this one house, and he had his own room while the rest of their family had to share a bedroom. There was 5 women in one room, and the rest of the house was made up of other more extended family members. However, they were not really allowed to speak to one another. He really wanted the family to stay close together, the immediate family, and not interact with the other family members in the house, let alone other people in the community. You find out later that her dad was actually a doctor, and he felt that if they connected to other people at school or neighbors or in their community, that they would basically take advantage of the situation that her dad was a doctor and would try to get free medical advice. And so he completely had them on lockdown all the time. In addition, because he was a doctor, he did a lot of very bizarre medical experiments and just interesting medical treatments on them, and you don't really know what they were for or why. The author is just kind of left with this pervasive sense that it was not okay. Noreen tells her stories through a bunch of different encounters with nature, and as she is telling her story, she's visiting different flat places around the UK and using those as opportunities to connect to the landscape and to share more of her story, while also kind of reflecting and healing and growing as a result of what happened to her. However, one thing that she doesn't do is just put this like neat bow on this project. It is raw and human, and things don't just wrap up nicely at the end. She has been shaped by her childhood and shaped by the experiences that happened to her today, and things don't just wrap up neatly. This is not one of those books where you hear about somebody who had something horrible happen to them. They learn from it, they grow, and in the end they are this perfectly formed human being. That's not this book. It was my mother's uncomplaining acceptance of suffering for her, and by extension for us, which filled me with bewildered pain. I didn't understand how someone who loved me could think things in her house weren't bad, because that required seeing me as worthy of so little, no more than the thinnest basics of life. I think the main reason why I loved this book so much is because it came into my life so unexpectedly, I suppose, because the reason I purchased it and what I thought it was and what it actually ended up being just was so drastically different than what I anticipated. And my encounter with it allowed me to grow and to feel seen and feel like other people in the world have similar experiences to me. I did not grow up in Pakistan. My dad did not act like that, but I definitely experienced trauma as a kid, and so many of her thoughts and feelings and emotions and everything connect almost perfectly to my thoughts, feelings, emotions, and kind of the things that I'm trying to process through right now. I am so grateful that I read this book, and it's not going to be the end of things, because now I'm reading a lot of the other books that she recommended in the book or that she mentioned, because obviously she is a reader and she would use other books as part of the conversation in her own. So this is just one step on a journey that will last quite a while, because one book will lead to the next, and it will just be this absolutely amazing reading experience that I hope will shape my life. Please let me know if you have read this book, if you plan to read it, or if you've read any others on the Women's Prize long list or short list for nonfiction. And yeah, I'm just really excited to get to some other books on there. However, this one I think is definitely going to make the top 10 of the year for me. Just calling it in advance. I think when you have a book that just speaks to your soul like so much, it's not one that you're going to let go of easily. It's definitely going to stick with me forever. Thank you guys so much for watching. Feel free to leave a comment below or just say hi, and I hope you guys have a great day.